To the first story, Mom uses my locked private diary and only safe space as her daily reading material. When I was a preteen, my mom gifted me a diary with a tiny lock and keys. I hid the keys, taped them in hidden places, and began using it almost immediately. I was a bookworm and loved reading and writing. I was also quite neglected as a child, so my diary was the only place I could express myself and feel heard. I'd read my last entries, and that allowed me to reflect on my own thoughts and actions and learn from past situations. It was honestly really great for my mental health. For a time, my mood and mental health improved. Time passed. I couldn't tell you how long. Probably a few months. Shortly after, I wrote an entry talking about my first wet dream, a few seconds of feet peeking out of bed sheets. Nothing truly NSFW. My mom got furious at me and confronted me, full on screaming. She Saturday me in the living room as she towered over me, screaming at my face, asking me if I thought this was normal, that I was having depraved thoughts no child my age should have. For a preteen, really, it was actually perfectly normal. That I had promised no sex before marriage when I was 5 years old, and that this was clearly going against my word. That I tried to defend myself at first and protest, not understanding how she even knew about it. But she took out the unlocked diary as proof of my depravity. And my attempts at defending myself, it was just a dream, just fueled her anger more. I Saturday there silently crying, answering quietly whatever she wanted me to say to whatever she asked, because nothing else would stop her escalation of screaming. I felt betrayed. My locked diary was my only safe place in that home. I was careful with what I wrote in my diary after that incident and set a few tests to check if I was still having my locked diary read without my knowledge or consent. I did this by writing about innocuous incidents in a way that could have sounded like it was more than it was, knowing it would prompt questions out of curiosity every time. It didn't take more than 2 days for the questions to come. Turns out, she'd hunt for my diary's keys and read it regularly. Needless to say, I stopped using my diary. My only breathing space had been turned against me. I significantly closed myself off from everyone. I felt if even my diary could betray me, then people even less. It was hard not writing. I no longer had an outlet for emotional or psychological relief. But I really couldn't trust anything anymore. After a week or two without any new entries, Mom asked why I had stopped using my diary. If I had dared, I'd have rolled my eyes and asked, "Why do you think?" But I knew better than to attract attention to myself and simply said I had lost interest in such a thing. To the second story, Karen secretly films me jogging and shows the video to my boss. I recently had an emergency appendectomy, and recovery has been slow. I had to take time off from my own athletics, but worse, from coaching in the kids' sports program I'm involved with. The experience made me step back and realize I really built my whole identity around being active and healthy. So the hit my physical abilities took as a result of being sick, plus the healing process, has made me feel lost. I've been working to regain the joy I used to experience from exercise. Without going, "Oh, you used to be so much faster with that," or "Your technique used to be so much stronger," or "You don't fit in anymore," or whatever else, and just enjoy myself regardless of the level I'm at. But ironically, the anxiety about not being able to do what I used to has made regaining those abilities difficult. It made me self-conscious about exercising in public spaces, but I was starting to finally get over it as friends convinced me the source of the concerns were all in my head. There's no way to get back to it other than training. So despite the anxiety, I started running again as soon as the doctors approved it. I went to the local track and just did a few slow laps each morning, building up speed every few days, and I've only just been authorized to add some sprints and bodyweight strength training to the mix. Occasionally there were other people at the track, but I didn't really notice because I run with headphones on and try to zone out in these lighter sessions. But little did I know my friends were wrong. It was not all in my head. I was being watched. And more than that, I was being judged. My absolute catastrophe level worst nightmare at this stage of building back my strength and speed. On Friday I was setting up for practice at the kids program, and the head coach asked me into his office because a parent had a complaint. A parent I didn't know too well, Karen, was there, and he said she had specific complaints about me. The meeting almost didn't happen because of Karen's initial refusal to put on a mask, required in our facilities for now. But eventually, her desire to tell on me for whatever she thought she had me on overrode her freedoms to infect everyone. I was a bit nervous, as anyone is being called to meet with their boss over a complaint. But I figured it was a classic case of my kid should start more. Or I know my kid tried out as a midfielder, but I want her to switch to defense. That kind of rules don't apply to me thing. But instead, I sit down in the office, and Karen is playing my boss a video of me running on the track. that she filmed from afar. It's surrounded by stadium-style risers. I was horrified, both because no one is ever totally used to seeing themselves on video, and because I was just embarrassed about how slow I was. But most importantly because Y was a virtual stranger. I'd met her personally maybe 4 times, ever, filming me while I ran on my own time at a private facility. She then went on to explain that her 8-year-old son, one of the players on my squad, was lapping me in the video and insisting the coaches need to hold themselves to higher athletic standards than the young players if they want to prepare them for college teams. Again, her son is 8. Apparently, her son would sometimes be running on the track while her older child was practicing on a nearby field. I never noticed the kid is still relatively new, and I don't pay much attention to the other people on the track. My boss patiently but firmly explained to Karen that my physical abilities are not the parents' concern and all personnel is closely managed by the head coaches who understand each unique situation and what's appropriate, and that her son wouldn't be impacted. Karen then went on to say my being out of shape was probably connected to why I'd been taking so much time off lately. Technically yes, it is because I was in the hospital, and complaining that the personnel changeover isn't good for the kids. My boss again reiterated that the head coaches hadn't changed or taken any time off, and that I was still one of the most skilled in the area I instruct. So this was not her concern. She asked if there was someone else she could speak to, but he explained that he was the owner and founder of this program. So, no, there was not. I knew my boss was intentionally avoiding saying what had happened to me or even alluding to a health issue, to protect my privacy, but I figured maybe being transparent with her would show her how ridiculous she was being and keep her tuition dollars in our program during a difficult time for sports clubs. But when I explained, she just turned to the boss and said, well, maybe you should furlough her until she's healed and bring on a health coach in the meantime, because my son needs someone out there who can keep up with him. My boss respected what I was trying to do, but made clear we weren't going further with that strategy to avoid setting a precedent of sharing coaches' personal circumstances. Telling her why people take time off or what their health status may be is not her concern because the program manages that and makes appropriate decisions. She kept kicking up a fuss, but the coach finally told her he had to get back out on the field, back to her son and everyone else's kids. She started physically leaving but continued fussing about how she was not satisfied and would not be recommending us to other parents. Pro tip: not the way to conduct yourself with the people who make recommendations to scouts concerning family culture. Team interaction. The coach wasn't preparing to leave. Instead, he stopped her in her tracks to tell her if she was found to be surveilling or otherwise harassing any staff members again, she would be permabanned from the program. No games or practices, no team social events, no presence in our buildings, and no clemency. So that was pretty satisfying. Her son is a good, average kid, and I'm glad the consequences were focused on booting her out rather than limiting his opportunities to have fun playing. So then we went out and had a great, happy, safe practice. This was still a pretty upsetting event for me personally though, and I'll never unsee that discouraging video of me running. But it was ultimately reassuring to know the other staff has my back. Leaving Karen in the dust is just another step on my road to recovery. On to the third story, entitled Mom Won't Watch Her Kids, They Climb into the Pasture with My Horses. So I've referenced this story a couple of times to people and decided that I'd tell the full tale. I live in a rural neighborhood, everyone's got 3-8 acres, so we're all pretty spaced out. I live on 5 acres and my nearest neighbors are a sweet elderly couple about 1 acre from me. They're perfect. The husband does yard work as a hobby, and his wife bakes. We have a nice agreement where if I need something big chainsawed, he takes the wood down and uses it for the fireplace. And in exchange, I trade recipes and bake with his wife. Honestly, they just like the company. I own my own home, have 2 horses, a cat, and recently my mom has also moved in because she was in financial trouble. I'm happy to help as she's good company, and I'd do anything for her. And then everything changed when COVID attacked. So here's where things go south. My neighbor's son and his family, wife, and 2 girls which are 4 and 7 live in the nearest city and didn't feel safe. I don't blame them, and because my neighbors are saints, they opened their home, and the brood moved right in. Up until this point, I was the youngest person in the neighborhood at 29. So having kids wander around is new for everyone. At first, it was no big issue. They stayed inside, got settled, maybe they were good kids. Total long shot, I know, but a girl can hope. So one morning I'm letting my horses out into the front pasture, a Clydesdale and a Welsh pony, and I hear the most high-pitched squealing from next door. It was so shrill my Clydesdale second-guessed going outside, but cautiously proceeded only to be met with more squeals. I pop my head out and the 2 girls are literally losing their minds. And I get it. Little White Pony and the horse from Brave, but still, they're large animals they don't know, so they should have the sense not to approach right. Teet. Not a snowball's chance in hell, these kids sprint to the fence shrieking. The pony runs around in panic and the Clydesdale standard there with the same oof-off look I've got on my face. Then the 4-yo starts to go under the fence. Hell, no, don't you dare climb under that fence, said firmly and admittedly kinda harsh. But I'll be damned if I have my horses mow over a kid. I walk over to them and they look like they're about to cry, but I explain firmly that they big animals and could hurt them easily and never go over or under the fence. They go home, I clean stalls. An hour in I hear someone banging on the door of my home, and I can see through my barn's hatch door my mom and the kid's mom are having a conversation. The kid's mom then storms down to the barn. I've never met this lady, but I know an entitled parent when I see one. The joy of joys, she starts going off on me. How dare you to make my kids cry? They just wanted to see the ponies, blah blah blah. But when she takes a breath I get my point across. Ma'am, your youngest was crawling under the fence towards two large animals none of you know. That Clydesdale is a 2-pound draft horse. He can literally crush you, not feel it, and do permanent damage. The pony looks cute but needs an experienced hand, as he is very untrustworthy, flighty, and has a tendency to bite. Your children are not allowed near them without my consent and heavy supervision. And never allowed in the pasture with them, do you understand? She then starts ranting about, well, if they're so dangerous, why do you have them? Are you even allowed to have them? I should call animal control. That crap. They're my personal horses, yes, I'm allowed to have them. Your kids trespassed on my property. I'm trying to keep them safe. This is not a petting zoo. She huffs off. I continue work. Later that evening when the husband gets home I explained what happened. He's understandably alarmed and I explained how dangerous that situation is. He agrees. Not that my horses are aggressive, mind you, but it's inherently dangerous in general. You've got a 50-minus 200-pound human versus an 800 to 000-pound horse. If you don't know what you're doing you can be seriously injured. Pure physics. So I'm optimistic with his reaction, but no, he's often not home, so I stay cautious. Later in the next week, I'm working from home and I suddenly hear screaming. Not excited screaming, scared little kids screaming. I rush outside and the 4-yo is bawling in the middle of the pasture, with the pony doing laps around the perimeter of the fence as my Clydesdale slowly approaches the little girl. The 7-yo is crying outside the fence and calling for her mom, but clearly their mom is not watching them. My initial terror recedes a bit because my Clydesdale is essentially a golden retriever in a horse's body, sweetest pushover in the world. He's gingerly approaching her in a slow, friendly way and being as non-threatening as he can. And with him so close the pony won't rush them. He's probably about 3 steps from her, but I yell for him to halt. And like a good boy he does. I make my way in with them and start asking the girl questions. Are you hurt? Being paramount, she's not, but she's clearly scared, so I pick her up and walk out, making my Clydesdale heel to me just in case the pony gets a dumb idea. The mom is still nowhere in sight, so I take them to my neighbors. What precedes are about 30 minutes of screaming and crying. The girl's mother was the one to open the door. She starts screaming at me and firing off questions before my neighbors intervene. I tell everyone exactly what happened, and my elderly neighbors blew up at her, not me. They screamed at her for being so irresponsible and negligent, how they could have been hurt. The mom tried throwing blame on me, but they weren't having it. My neighbors apologize profusely, and I go about my day until the husband gets home. He came by and apologized too for his family's behavior, and especially the behavior of his wife. I accepted it and said I understood. They're little girls, to know the allure of magnificent fluffy horses. The mom was at fault for not watching the kids. I'm just glad everyone was okay. The girls were still really shaken up, so I extended an olive branch. Because, well, I was an overexcited kid who liked horses once too. Just with a horse mom who knew what she was doing. And I didn't want this to completely traumatize them from being around horses. So the next day I properly introduced them to my Clydesdale, with him in his stall with the inside hatch open and the girls being supervised by their father and me, safe in the barn. They loved it. Clydesdale loved the attention. Everyone's happy, right? Well, except the mom, who took my olive branches and offered to teach them horseback riding. Give free lessons. And other crap, but her husband shot it down hard, and presumably so did my neighbors. Since then it's been quiet. I did, however, install a second electrical wire on the bottom. Not just on the top, just in case. And yes, they did test it. 7-yo got zapped pretty good and got in trouble with her dad. Aside from that, there have been no incidents other than them wanted to pet them when I drop evening feed once in a while. Here's hoping it stays peaceful. But seriously, don't go up to animals you don't know. That's it for the video, thanks for watching.